The rain hammered down like divine judgment, each drop exploding against the cracked pavement of Elm Street. Tamika stood frozen in the middle of the intersection, her worn canvas basket overturned at her feet, watching 24 loaves of bread dissolve into the muddy gutter. Her hands trembled as she looked up at the man standing before her, the man she had fed every single morning for 6 months, believing him to be homeless and forgotten. But there he stood, in a charcoal gray suit that probably cost more than she earned in a year, custom-tailored to perfection, Italian leather shoes polished to mirror brightness. His beard was gone, revealing a strong jawline and features that belonged on magazine covers. Behind him idled a Bentley midnight black, with chrome accents, and a uniformed driver stood at attention. But worse than all of that was the woman emerging from the vehicle's other side. Simone Clark stepped onto the wet pavement like a queen surveying conquered territory, her stiletto heels clicking with predatory precision. Simone wore a cream-colored designer dress, and diamonds glittered at her throat, wrists, and ears with obscene brilliance. This was the same woman who had cornered Tamika at the church picnic 2 weeks earlier, who had called her gutter trash, loud enough for the entire congregation to hear, who had dumped her plate of food onto Tamika's shoes while the pastor looked away. Now Simone moved to Deshawn's side, with possessive grace, her manicured hand resting on his shoulder like she was marking property. Tamika felt her knees buckle slightly, the weight of betrayal pressing down on her chest. She had given Deshawn her last $20 just yesterday, when her electricity bill was overdue. She had packed extra bread for him, when her own stomach cramped with hunger. She had prayed for him every single night, believing God had placed him in her path for divine purpose. Had all of it been a performance? Had he been laughing at her the entire time? "You," Tamika finally managed to say, her voice cracking with confusion and heartbreak. "You have been lying to me this entire time?" She gestured at his suit, at the car, at Simone's triumphant expression, her hand shaking violently. Deshawn's face showed conflicting emotions, guilt, desperation, something that might have been love or might have been pity. He opened his mouth to respond, but before any words could escape, Simone laughed, a sound so cold it seemed to freeze the rain itself. "Did you really think," Simone said, her voice dripping with venom, "that a man like him would ever genuinely care about a dirty little bread girl like you? Did you honestly believe that someone of his caliber, his breeding, his wealth, would see anything in you beyond a charity case?" She stepped closer to Tamika, invading her space with aggressive confidence. "Let me explain something to you, sweetheart, since you clearly need education in how the real world works. Deshawn Montgomery is the sole heir to the Montgomery Hotel empire, a billion-dollar corporation that owns properties in 23 countries. His family has more money than you could count in 10 lifetimes. His mother, Vivian Montgomery, sits on the boards of 15 major corporations and has the mayor, the governor, and half the state senate in her pocket. And me? I am Simone Clark, daughter of the Clark banking dynasty, Deshawn's fiancée since we were both 16 years old, bound together by contracts and family agreements worth hundreds of millions of dollars." She paused, letting each revelation sink in like poison, watching Tamika's face crumble with growing satisfaction. "So you see, whatever little fantasy you have been entertaining in that simple mind of yours, whatever dreams you have been dreaming about my fiancé, they end right here, right now, in this gutter where you belong." The world seemed to tilt sideways as Tamika processed this information. 6 months earlier, Tamika's life had been difficult, but simple. She woke every morning at 4 o'clock, in her cramped one-room apartment, the place she had shared with her grandmother, Nana Grace, until the old woman's heart had finally given out 2 years ago. The walls were thin enough that she could hear her neighbors' arguments and laughter. The pipes groaned and rattled whenever she used water, and the radiator only worked when it felt like cooperating. But it had been home, filled with Nana Grace's presence even after her death, every corner holding memories of the woman who had raised Tamika after her own mother had abandoned her at 3 years old. Nana Grace had taught her everything: how to bake bread that made people close their eyes in appreciation, how to stretch a dollar until it screamed, how to hold her head high when the world tried to grind her down. "Baby girl," Nana used to say, "we ain't got much, but we got each other, and we got God." Tamika had learned to bake from Nana Grace's patient instruction: buttermilk biscuits that melted on your tongue, honey wheat rolls with the perfect golden crust, sweet cornbread that people claimed was better than their grandmothers. By the time Tamika turned 16, she was selling loaves on the corner of Elm and 5th Street, saving every precious dollar for Nana's heart medication. The doctors had explained that Nana Grace's heart was failing, worn out from 7 decades of hard living, of sacrificing her own needs for others, of working herself to the bone cleaning houses for wealthy families who never bothered to learn her name. These families lived up on Laurel Hill in their massive estates, and they paid Nana Grace barely enough to survive, while she scrubbed their toilets and washed their dishes. The tips came in envelopes marked simply "help," or sometimes just left on countertops. But Nana Grace refused to stop working despite her failing health. "Don't you ever bow to nobody," Nana had told Tamika one evening, her hands shaking as she carefully counted out pills into a weekly organizer. "You hear me, child? You hold your head high no matter what." Tamika had promised, had sworn on everything she held sacred, that she would honor Nana's strength and dignity. But keeping promises proved harder than making them. When Tamika was 19 years old, on an ordinary Tuesday, Nana Grace collapsed while cleaning the Henderson mansion up on Laurel Hill. Tamika had just sold her last loaf of bread for the day when her phone rang with the call that shattered her world. The hospital's tone was professionally sympathetic, but ultimately detached, as they informed her that her grandmother had been brought in by ambulance, that she should come immediately. By the time Tamika arrived, having run the entire 2 miles because she could not afford a taxi, Nana Grace was already gone. "Heart failure," the nurses said with practiced gentleness. The financial reality of death hit Tamika like a freight train. She could not afford a proper funeral, could not afford a casket that was not the cheapest pine box available, could not afford a headstone. The church, Greater Hope Baptist, where Nana had tithed faithfully for 40 years, where she had sung in the choir and volunteered for every fundraiser, offered thoughts and prayers, but no financial assistance. Reverend Clarence had smiled that tight, uncomfortable smile and told Tamika that the Lord will provide, sister, have faith. But the Lord did not provide money for caskets or burial plots. The church community that had happily accepted Nana's contributions for 4 decades suddenly had empty pockets when Tamika needed them. So she buried Nana Grace in the cheapest plot she could find at Riverside Cemetery, in a section where the grass was patchy. There was no ceremony, no flowers, no gathering. Just Tamika, alone, standing in the rain, whispering apologies into the freshly turned dirt. "I am so sorry, Nana," she had said, her voice breaking into sobs. "I am so sorry I could not do more, could not give you the send-off you deserved, could not even afford a marker with your name on it." The guilt became a constant companion after that, a weight she carried in her chest. But Tamika channeled that guilt into work, into motion. into the relentless pursuit of survival. She took on 3 jobs, maintaining her bread-selling business at dawn, cleaning office buildings downtown during midday, and waitressing at Bernie's Diner from 6 in the evening until 2 in the morning. She slept maybe 3 hours a night on a good night. Her hands bled from kneading dough and handling hot pans and scrubbing floors. Her feet screamed in constant agony from standing on concrete for 20 hours a day. The cheap shoes she wore offering no support, blisters forming on top of blisters until walking became an act of will. But she never stopped moving, never allowed herself to pause long enough to feel the full weight of her loss, because stopping meant admitting that Nana Grace had died for nothing. That admission was something Tamika's soul could not bear. Still, there were cracks appearing in her armor. Her best friend since childhood, Cherise Williams, stopped returning her phone calls after Tamika had to decline yet another invitation to go out because she could not afford a single drink. The friendship that had survived elementary school and high school could not survive poverty. People at church began whispering when Tamika walked by, their eyes sliding over her worn shoes and flour-dusted jeans with barely concealed judgment. "Poor thing," they would say, in voices just loud enough for her to hear. "Bless her heart, she is really struggling." What they could do was help, but that possibility never seemed to occur to them. Their charity extended only as far as empty platitudes and prayers that cost them nothing. Nobody offered her work or assistance or even basic kindness, with one notable exception. Miss Lorraine, who ran the corner store on Elm Street, had been Nana Grace's friend for 30 years. She allowed Tamika to sell bread from the store's front steps without asking for a percentage of the sales, even providing a small table and chair. "Your Nana was good people," Miss Lorraine said simply when Tamika tried to thank her. "Real good people. I will not forget that, just because she is gone. You sell your bread here, as long as you need to, baby girl." It was the only consistent kindness in Tamika's life. Then, approximately 6 months before this rainy confrontation, he appeared. The homeless man who would turn out to be anything but homeless. He began showing up outside Miss Lorraine's store every morning, always in the same spot on the curb, always wearing tattered clothes that hung off his frame like rags. His beard was thick and unkempt, streaked with gray, and his face was usually hidden, downturned toward the pavement, as if the weight of existence had become too heavy for his neck to support. He never spoke to anyone, never begged for money or food, never even made eye contact with the people who passed him by. He just sat there in silence, staring at the ground with an expression of such profound defeat that it hurt to look at him directly. Most people did not look at him at all, averting their eyes as if homelessness might be contagious, crossing the street to avoid passing too close, treating him like a piece of urban furniture rather than a human being. But Tamika found herself unable to ignore him. Maybe it was because she remembered Nana Grace's words. "We are all just one bad day away from the streets, baby girl. Do not you ever forget that." Or maybe Tamika could not ignore him because she saw herself reflected in his invisible status, both of them overlooked, dismissed, treated as less than human by a society that valued money and status above everything else. So one morning, after a particularly good sales day, she stopped in front of him. She stood there for a moment, watching him stare at the pavement, and then spoke softly. "Hey there," Tamika said gently. "Are you hungry?" He looked up slowly, as if the simple act of raising his head required enormous effort, and when his eyes met hers, Tamika felt her breath catch. His eyes were deep brown, almost black in certain light, and they held such profound sadness that she wanted to cry. They were the eyes of someone who had lost everything that mattered. For a long moment he did not move, just stared at her, as if he could not quite believe someone was actually speaking to him. Then, very slowly, he nodded once. Tamika reached into her basket and pulled out a honey wheat roll, still warm from that morning's baking. It was the last roll she had, the one she had been planning to eat for her own lunch. But looking at this man's hollowed face, she could not imagine keeping it. "It is not much," Tamika said apologetically, holding the roll out to him. "But it is yours, if you want it." He took it with hands that trembled visibly, his fingers thin and calloused, and for a moment he just held it, staring at the bread as if it were made of gold. Then he raised it to his mouth and took a bite, and as he chewed, tears began streaming down his face, cutting clean tracks through the dirt on his cheeks. He ate slowly, savoring every bite, and the tears kept coming, silent and steady. Tamika felt her own throat tighten watching him. "Thank you," he whispered, his voice rough and cracked. "Thank you so much." Tamika smiled, feeling warmth spread through her chest despite the morning chill. "You are welcome. Do you have a name?" He hesitated, seeming to struggle with the question, as if his own identity had become uncertain during his time on the streets. Then, in that same rough whisper, he answered, "Deshawn. My name is Deshawn." From that morning forward, Deshawn became part of Tamika's daily routine. Every morning she would stop by with bread for him. Sometimes 2 rolls, sometimes a biscuit with butter, occasionally a slice of her sweet cornbread. And slowly, painfully slowly, like a wounded animal learning to trust again, Deshawn began to open up and talk to her. He told her about losing his job, though he was vague about what that job had been, describing it only as corporate work. He told her about his family turning their backs when he needed them most, about siblings who stopped returning calls. He told her about the shelters where he sometimes slept. "I used to be somebody," Deshawn said one morning, his voice thick with shame. "I used to matter. I had a position, a title, people who respected me or at least pretended to. Now, I am nothing. I am invisible." Tamika felt anger flash through her at those words, anger at a world that could make someone feel so worthless. "You are not nothing," she said firmly, looking him straight in the eyes. "You hear me, Deshawn? You are not nothing. You are a person, a human being with value and worth that has nothing to do with your bank account or your job or where you sleep at night. Do not you ever forget that." He looked at her as if she had just handed him the world on a silver platter, as if those simple words carried more weight than anything else in his life. But not everyone in Tamika's life was happy about her decision to help this homeless man. Charisse saw them together one morning and immediately pulled Tamika aside, with barely concealed disgust on her face. "Girl, what are you doing?" Charisse hissed, glancing at Deshawn with distaste. "You are out here feeding some random homeless man, like you have money to spare? Have you lost your mind?" Tamika felt her jaw tighten with irritation. "His name is Deshawn, and he is hungry. That is all that matters." Charisse rolled her eyes dramatically. "He's probably on drugs, Tamika, or mentally ill, or dangerous. You are too soft. You always have been. You let people take advantage of you because you cannot stand up for yourself." The words stung, particularly coming from someone who had once claimed to be her closest friend. But Tamika bit her tongue and simply said, "He needs help," and walked away. The judgment did not stop with Charisse. At church, Reverend Clarence pulled Tamika aside after the service with an expression of exaggerated concern. "Sister Tamika," he said in that unctuous tone he used when pretending to care, "I have heard some concerning reports that you have been associating with one of the less fortunate individuals down on Elm Street." Is this true? Tamika felt heat rise to her cheeks. His name is Deshaun, she said, emphasizing the name to remind the Reverend that they were discussing a person, not a problem. And yes, I bring him food sometimes. He is hungry. Reverend Clarence adjusted his expensive glasses, and his expression became even more patronizing. Yes, well, that is very charitable of you, sister. Very Christian indeed. However, you must be careful about your associations. People are watching, you understand. The congregation is watching, and we wouldn't want anyone to get the wrong idea about your character or your judgment. A young woman like yourself, unmarried and alone, spending time with a homeless man. Well, you can imagine how that might look. Perception matters in this world, sister. Tamika felt her jaw clench so hard. Her teeth ached. My character, she repeated slowly, forcing each word out carefully, is just fine, Reverend. And I will continue to help anyone who needs it, regardless of what people think or say. The Reverend's smile became strained, the mask of concern slipping to reveal irritation underneath. Of course, he said quickly. I am only looking out for you, sister. Only trying to protect your reputation. He walked away then, leaving Tamika standing in the church parking lot, feeling dirty despite having done nothing wrong. That was when the sabotage began, subtle at first, but gradually escalating. One morning, Tamika's bread basket was knocked over by a man in a business suit who claimed to be in a rush, sending her carefully arranged loaves tumbling onto the dirty sidewalk. He did not stop to apologize or help. Another day, she arrived at her usual spot to find an official-looking notice claiming the area required special permits. Miss Lorraine angrily tore down the notice, insisting it was fake, but the harassment had its intended effect. Then the attacks became more personal. Someone spray-painted "beggar lover" in huge red letters on the side of her apartment building, right below her window. The landlord blamed her for the vandalism and threatened to evict her if it happened again. She found a dead rat placed deliberately in her bread basket one morning, its stiff body nestled among her rolls. The sight made her physically ill, and she had to throw away not just that morning's inventory, but also the basket itself. The cruelest blow came on a Sunday afternoon when she was using the church bathroom and overheard two women gossiping. She is trying to save him, one woman said, with mocking laughter, like she is some kind of saint or something. The other woman snorted derisively. Please, she just wants attention. She probably thinks this homeless man will fall in love with her. Tamika stood frozen in the bathroom stall, her hands shaking so violently she had to grip the walls to steady herself. She wanted to burst out and confront them, to defend herself and her motivations. But what would be the point? They had already decided who she was. So she waited in silence until they left, then emerged from the stall and stared at her reflection in the bathroom mirror. Her face looked tired, older than her 21 years, with dark circles under her eyes from chronic exhaustion. Her clothes were clean but worn, mended in places where fabric had given out. They do not matter, she whispered to her reflection. Their opinions do not matter. But they did matter, in the way that constant criticism and judgment always matter, wearing down your defenses like water eroding stone. Despite all the harassment, Deshaun kept showing up every morning, and their friendship continued to deepen. He started helping her carry her baskets when they got too heavy. He started walking her home when evening fell. And one evening, as they sat together on the curb watching the sunset, he said something that made her heart stop. You saved my life, Tamika, Deshaun said quietly, not looking at her, but staring straight ahead. She blinked, confused. What do you mean? He took a deep breath, and when he spoke again, his voice was thick with barely controlled emotion. The night before we met, before that first morning when you gave me bread, I was standing on the Jefferson Street Bridge. It was 3 in the morning, and I was alone, and I was ready to jump. I had the rail in my hands, and I was leaning over, looking down at the water, telling myself it would be quick and easy, and then all the pain would stop. But then I thought, maybe I would try one more day, just one more day, to see if anything changed. And that day, you showed up. Tamika felt tears spring to her eyes immediately. "Deshaun," she started, but he continued talking, the words pouring out like water from a broken dam. "I do not know why you care about me. I do not understand what you see when you look at me that everyone else misses. But I am grateful, Tamika. I am more grateful than I have words to express. You gave me a reason to keep going, to believe that maybe I still matter to someone, even if I am nobody important." She reached out without thinking and took his hand, squeezing it tightly. "You matter," she said fiercely. "You matter so much, Deshaun. Do not you ever forget that. Do not you ever doubt it. You are important and valuable and worthy of love and kindness. The world just forgot how to see it. But I see it. I see you." He turned to look at her then, and the expression on his face was so raw, so vulnerable, so filled with emotions she could not quite name, that it took her breath away. That moment of connection made everything that followed so much more devastating. Because that was when she appeared, shattering the fragile peace that Tamika and Deshaun had built together. Simone Clark arrived like a force of nature, stepping out of her luxury vehicle with the confidence of someone who had never been told no. She was tall and striking, with the kind of polished beauty that came from expensive salons and personal trainers. She wore designer clothes that fit perfectly. Everything about her screamed wealth and privilege, from her perfectly straightened hair to her flawless makeup to the way she moved through space as if she owned it. She marched directly up to where Tamika was arranging her bread basket, and without any preamble, launched into an attack that left Tamika speechless. "You," Simone spat, her perfectly painted lips, though, curling with disgust as she pointed one manicured finger at Tamika's chest. "You need to stay away from my fiancé. Right now. Immediately." Tamika felt confusion wash over her like cold water, her mind struggling to process what she was hearing. "You're what?" she stammered. "Your fiancé. I do not even know who you are." Simone's laugh was harsh and humorless, designed to humiliate. "Oh, do not play stupid with me, Deshaun. The man you have been obsessively feeding and fawning over for months, he's mine. He belongs to me. And I do not appreciate little charity cases like you trying to worm your way into his life with your pathetic acts of kindness." The words hit Tamika like physical blows. "I do not know what you are talking about," she said, her voice shaking. "Deshaun is homeless. He's not engaged to anyone." But Simone cut her off with another cruel laugh. "Homeless? Is that what he told you? Oh, that is priceless." She pulled out her phone and shoved it in Tamika's face, showing her a photograph of Deshaun, clean-shaven, wearing an expensive suit, standing beside this woman at what looked like a formal gala. "Let me educate you about reality, honey. Deshaun Montgomery is the heir to a billion-dollar hotel empire. His family owns properties all over the world. And me? I am his fiancée, his intended, the woman he is going to marry as soon as he finishes this ridiculous social experiment his mother made him participate in. So whatever little fantasy you have been entertaining, whatever dreams you have been having about him, they end now." Tamika felt the ground shift beneath her feet. felt reality warping into something unrecognizable. She looked around desperately for Deshaun and found him standing about 50 feet away, frozen in place, watching this confrontation unfold with an expression of horror and guilt. "Deshaun," she called out, her voice breaking. "Is this true? Please tell me this is not true." He started walking toward them slowly, and with each step, Tamika saw the truth written across his face. The guilt, the shame, the confirmation that every word Simone had spoken was accurate. When he reached them, he opened his mouth to speak, but Simone was not finished. "Oh, and one more thing," Simone said, her smile vicious and triumphant. "Every dollar he has been taking from you, every pathetic 20 or 50 you have been giving him thinking you were helping, he has been laughing about it with our friends, telling us all about the sad little bread girl who thinks she is saving him. You have been the joke of our social circle for months." Tamika felt something break inside her chest, some essential part of her spirit cracking under the weight of this betrayal. She had been struggling to survive, giving away food she needed herself, sharing money she desperately required, all while believing she was helping someone in genuine need. And the entire time, she had been nothing more than entertainment for wealthy people. "That is not true," Deshaun said finally, his voice hoarse. "Simone, that is not what happened. I never laughed about her." But Simone talked over him dismissively. "Oh, please, Deshaun, do not try to rewrite history now. You told me yourself how pathetic she was, how she looked at you with those sad puppy eyes, how desperate she seemed for any scrap of male attention." Tamika looked at Deshaun, searching his face for denial, for some sign that Simone was lying, but he would not meet her eyes, and that silence was more damning than any words could have been. "I need to go," Tamika whispered, backing away from both of them. "I need to leave right now." She turned and ran, leaving her basket behind, leaving her dignity scattered on the pavement. For 3 days after that confrontation, Tamika did not leave her apartment, except to go to her cleaning job and waitressing shift. She stopped selling bread, stopped going to her usual corner, stopped existing in any space where she might encounter Deshaun. She cried until she had no tears left, until her eyes were swollen and her throat was raw. She replayed every interaction with Deshaun in her mind, searching for clues she had missed. How had she been so blind? How had she failed to notice that his clothes, while tattered, were made from expensive fabrics? How had she not questioned why a homeless man had such straight white teeth, such clear skin beneath the dirt, such educated speech? The answer was simple and humiliating. She had seen what she wanted to see. She had needed to believe that her kindness mattered, that she was making a difference. And in that need, she had made herself vulnerable to manipulation. On the 4th day, there was a knock at her door. Tamika considered ignoring it, but the knocking persisted, polite but insistent. Finally, she opened the door to find an older man in an expensive suit standing in her hallway, looking completely out of place in her rundown building. "Miss Tamika?" the man asked, his voice cultured and professional. "My name is Bernard Crawford. I am Deshaun Montgomery's attorney. May I come in and speak with you for a few minutes?" Bernard asked. Tamika wanted to slam the door in his face, wanted nothing to do with anyone connected to Deshaun. But curiosity won out over anger, and she stepped aside to let him enter. Bernard looked around her tiny apartment with an expression that was difficult to read. Not quite pity, not quite judgment, something more like understanding. "First, I want to apologize on behalf of the Montgomery family for the way you were treated. What happened was unacceptable." Tamika crossed her arms defensively. "Did Deshaun send you here to apologize for him? Because if so, you can leave. I do not want his apologies or his explanations or anything else from him. Bernard shook his head. Actually, Deshawn does not know I am here. I came on my own initiative because I believe you deserve to know the full truth, not the twisted version Simone Clark presented to you. He pulled a folder from his briefcase and set it on her small kitchen table. 6 months ago, Vivian Montgomery, Deshawn's mother, designed what she called a character-building exercise for her son. She believed he had become too disconnected from reality, too insulated by wealth. So she gave him an ultimatum: live homeless on the streets for 6 months, with no money, no resources, no family support, or lose his inheritance entirely. It was meant to teach him humility and empathy. Tamika felt her stomach twist. So, I was part of an experiment? Part of some rich woman's lesson plan for her spoiled son? Bernard held up his hand. Please, let me finish. Yes, initially you were an unintended variable. Deshawn was not supposed to form connections or accept help. He was supposed to suffer in isolation and learn his lesson. But then you appeared, and everything changed. You showed him genuine kindness, with no expectation of reward. You treated him like a human being, and he fell in love with you. Tamika laughed bitterly. Love? Is that what you call lying to someone for 6 months? Bernard opened the folder and pulled out several photographs. These are surveillance photos that Simone had taken. She has been monitoring Deshawn throughout this entire experiment, obsessively tracking his movements. The photographs showed Deshawn, at various moments over the past 6 months, sitting alone on the curb with his head in his hands, standing outside Tamika's apartment building at night, as if wanting to knock, but not daring to, holding the bread she had given him with an expression of profound emotion. Simone is not actually Deshawn's fiancée in any emotional sense, Bernard continued quietly. Their families made a business arrangement when they were teenagers, a merger of dynasties designed to consolidate wealth and power. Deshawn has been trying to escape that arrangement for years, but the financial and legal complications are enormous. His trust fund, his position in the company, his entire inheritance, all of it is contingent on maintaining family obligations. He pulled out more documents. But here is what Simone did not tell you. Deshawn never laughed about you or mocked you to his friends. In fact, he has been arguing with his mother for weeks, trying to find a way out of his arrangement with Simone, so he could tell you the truth and pursue a real relationship with you. Bernard showed her printouts of text messages between Deshawn and his mother. Heated exchanges where Deshawn defended Tamika. In one message he wrote, I would rather lose everything than continue lying to her. She deserves better than this deception. Vivian's responses were cold. You will complete the 6 months as agreed. Your feelings are irrelevant. Bernard leaned forward, his expression earnest. I am not here to excuse what Deshawn did, or to minimize the pain his deception caused you. What I am here to tell you is that his feelings are genuine, and he is currently engaged in a legal battle with his own mother to break free from the obligations that have controlled his life. Bernard stood to leave and handed her an envelope. Inside is a letter from him, along with legal documents showing that every dollar he accepted from you has been placed in a trust account in your name with compound interest. He never spent a penny of it. He also established a scholarship fund in your grandmother's name at the community college. He walked to the door, then paused. One more thing you should know. Simone has been embezzling from the Montgomery Foundation for years, funneling charity money into her personal accounts. Deshawn discovered this during his time on the streets. He has been building a case against her, and that is the real reason she is so desperate to discredit you. She knows he is choosing you over her, and if he does, her crimes will be exposed. After Bernard left, Tamika sat on her bed for over an hour, staring at the envelope. Finally, she opened it and began to read Deshawn's letter, written in his own handwriting across dozens of pages. Dear Tamika, I do not expect you to forgive me. I do not expect you to understand, but I need to try to explain. He described his life before the streets, a childhood of suffocating privilege, where every friendship was transactional, where people valued his last name more than his personhood. He described the moment his mother issued her ultimatum, how he had felt simultaneously angry and relieved. He described his first days on the streets, the shock of invisibility, the profound loneliness, and then he described the morning. He described his life before the streets, a childhood of suffocating privilege, where every friendship was transactional, where people valued his last name more than his personhood. He described the moment his mother issued her ultimatum, how he had felt simultaneously angry and relieved. He described his first days on the streets, the shock of invisibility, the profound loneliness, and then he described the morning Tamika stopped to speak to him. When you asked if I was hungry, you looked directly into my eyes. You saw me. For the first time in my entire life, someone saw me as a human being, rather than a Montgomery, rather than an inheritance, rather than a business opportunity. And when you gave me that bread, that simple act of kindness with no agenda behind it, I broke. I cried because I realized I had spent 28 years alive without ever experiencing genuine compassion. The letter continued for pages, describing how each interaction with her had changed him fundamentally, how her kindness had restored his faith in humanity. The letter explained how he had wanted to tell her the truth 100 times, but was bound by his mother's rules. Any deviation from the experiment meant complete disinheritance, not just for him, but penalties for the family foundation that supported thousands of people. I was trapped between my growing love for you and my responsibility to others who depended on that foundation, he wrote. Every day I woke up hating myself for the deception, but believing that 6 months of lies was worth it if it meant I could eventually be with you honestly, with my mother's blessing, and without legal complications. He described the moment Simone had discovered his feelings, how she had threatened to destroy Tamika's reputation if he did not end the experiment immediately and marry her as planned. She gave me an ultimatum: marry her within the month, or she would make sure you were publicly humiliated, your business destroyed, your name dragged through the mud. I refused, and that is why she confronted you that day in the rain. The letter ended with a simple plea. I am not asking for forgiveness because I do not deserve it. I am not asking for another chance because I have no right to one. I am simply asking you to know the truth, that you are the most genuine, beautiful, courageous person I have ever known. That loving you changed me in ways I cannot fully articulate. That if I could go back and do it differently, I would choose honesty, even if it meant losing everything. You deserved that from the beginning. I am sorry I was too weak and too afraid to give it to you. Tamika read the letter 3 times, tears streaming down her face. She did not know what to feel: anger, betrayal, hope, confusion, all swirling together in a storm of emotion. She set the letter aside and looked at the legal documents Bernard had left. The trust account in her name contained every dollar she had given Deshawn, plus interest, nearly $800 total. The scholarship fund in Nana Grace's name was worth $50,000. For a week, Tamika did not respond. She went back to work, back to selling bread, back to her routine. But everything felt different now, colored by knowledge she could not unknow. She found herself thinking about Deshawn constantly. Not the wealthy heir, but the broken man on the curb who had cried over her bread. She thought about the messages Bernard had shown her, the evidence that Deshawn had fought for her, even when she did not know he was fighting. She thought about Nana Grace and what she would have said about all of this. Finally, on the 8th day, she made a decision. She put on her best dress, the one she wore to church, and took a bus up to Laurel Hill. The Montgomery estate was even more imposing than she had imagined. Gates, guards, a driveway that seemed to stretch for miles. When she gave her name at the gate, the guard made a phone call, then waved her through with a look of surprise. Bernard met her at the front door, his face breaking into a relieved smile. "Miss Tamika, I am so glad you came. Please, follow me." He led her through hallways that looked like museum exhibits, past rooms larger than her entire apartment building, until they reached a study where Deshawn sat, with his head in his hands. He looked up when the door opened, and the expression on his face when he saw her was something Tamika would remember for the rest of her life. Shock, hope, fear, love, all mixed together. "Tamika," he breathed, standing up so quickly his chair fell backward. "I didn't think you would come. I hoped, but I didn't dare to believe." She held up her hand to stop him. "I read your letter. All of it. And I spoke with Bernard. And I have been thinking about everything for days." Deshawn waited, barely breathing. "What you did was wrong," Tamika continued. "Lying to me, deceiving me, making me feel foolish. All of that was wrong, and it hurt me deeply." He nodded, his face crumbling. I know, and I am so." "But," Tamika interrupted, "I also understand why you did it. I do not agree with it, and I am still angry about it. But I understand the impossible position you were in. And I believe that the person I got to know on those streets, the person who cried over bread and told me about wanting to jump off a bridge, that person was real. That person was you. Maybe more you than you have ever been." Deshawn's eyes filled with tears. "That was me. That is me. Without the money and the name, and all the expectations, that broken man on the curb was the most honest version of myself I have ever been. And you saved him. You saved me." Tamika took a deep breath. "I am not saying I forgive you completely. I am not saying we can just go back to how things were. Trust takes time to rebuild, and you shattered mine pretty thoroughly. But I am saying I am willing to try. I am willing to see if we can build something real, something honest." Deshawn closed the distance between them in 2 steps, then stopped himself, as if afraid to touch her without permission. "I will spend the rest of my life proving I am worthy of that chance. I promise you, Tamika. No more lies, no more deception, just truth, even when it is hard." She smiled, small but genuine. "Good. Because I do not date liars, even rich ones." He laughed, a sound of pure relief. "What about former liars who are desperately in love with you?" Her smile widened. "Those might be acceptable, under certain conditions." What Tamika did not know yet was that in the next room, Vivian Montgomery had been listening to the entire conversation through the open door. And for the first time in decades, the cold, calculating matriarch felt something crack in her carefully constructed armor. This girl, this poor bread seller, had done something Vivian's money and power never could. She had reached her son's heart and pulled him back from the edge. Maybe, Vivian thought, she had been wrong about what truly mattered. 2 months later, the news broke like a bomb across social media and traditional press. Simone Clark arrested for embezzling over $3 million from the Montgomery Foundation. The evidence Deshawn and Bernard had compiled was irrefutable. Forged documents, fake invoices, money transferred to offshore accounts. The Clark family, desperate to avoid their own scandal, immediately disowned Simone and cut off all financial support. She was left with nothing: no money, no family, no friends, no prospects. The same social circle that had once fawned over her now treated her like a disease. She tried reaching out to Deshawn from jail, begging for mercy, asking him to drop the charges. He refused. "You threatened the woman I love," he told her coldly during their one phone conversation. "You tried to destroy her reputation and her life. You get exactly what you deserve." Meanwhile, Tamika opened her own bakery with a business loan she secured herself, refusing to use any of Deshawn's money. She named it Nana Grace's Kitchen and hired 3 employees from her neighborhood who needed work. Deshawn worked there too, not as an owner, but as an employee. He showed up at 5 every morning to help knead dough, greet customers, sweep floors, wash dishes, all the tasks he had never done in his privileged life. He wore simple clothes and earned minimum wage, which he donated entirely to local homeless shelters. Vivian Montgomery, true to the change Tamika had sparked in her, restructured the entire family foundation. She implemented oversight committees, transparent accounting, and programs directly serving the community, rather than just looking good on paper. She also publicly apologized for the social experiment she had forced on her son, acknowledging it had been cruel and misguided. The church that had judged Tamika so harshly suddenly wanted to celebrate her success story. Reverend Clarence showed up at the bakery with cameras, ready to take credit for supporting her through difficult times. Tamika looked him straight in the eye and said, "Where were you when I needed help burying my grandmother? Where were you when I was sleeping 3 hours a night, trying to survive? Do not come here now, looking for glory you did not earn." The Reverend left, humiliated, and that video went viral within hours. People across the country shared it, applauding Tamika for speaking truth to hypocritical authority. Her bakery became famous overnight, with people driving from hours away just to buy bread from that brave girl who stood up to her pastor. But Tamika did not let fame change her. She still woke up at 4 in the morning. She still gave free bread to anyone who was hungry. She still remembered what it felt like to be invisible and made sure to see everyone who walked through her door. And every Sunday, she and Deshawn visited Nana Grace's grave, which now had a beautiful marble headstone that read, "Grace Williams, beloved grandmother. She taught me that kindness costs nothing, but is worth everything." 6 months after the bakery opened, Deshawn proposed, not with a massive diamond or an elaborate public display, but quietly, in the bakery after closing, with a simple gold band and a question asked on his knees: "Will you marry me? Not because of who I was born to be, but because of who you helped me become." Tamika said yes. They married in a small ceremony at Riverside Cemetery, right beside Nana Grace's grave, because Tamika wanted her grandmother to be part of the most important moment of her life. The guest list was tiny: Miss Lorraine, Bernard, a few bakery employees, and some people from the neighborhood who had supported Tamika when she had nothing. Vivian Montgomery attended and wept openly, something no one in her family had ever seen her do. Charisse, Tamika's former best friend, showed up uninvited and tried to apologize, claiming she had always believed in Tamika. Tamika looked at her sadly and said, "I forgive you, because holding grudges poisons your own heart. But friendship is built on loyalty through hard times, not just good ones. You were not there when I needed you, and that is something I cannot forget." Years later, when people asked Tamika about her extraordinary story, she always said the same thing: "I did not help Deshawn to get anything in return. I helped him because it was right. because he was hungry, because he was human. The rest just happened. And that, she believed, was the real lesson. That genuine kindness, given freely without expectation, has a power that wealth and status can never match.